I spent a lot of time and money on this guitar just to give it away for free in the end. It's going to an auction that raises funds for the families of first responders in need and those who were injured in the line of duty. So far, all of my guitar builds have been modified versions of well-known brands. This is the first time I'm making something truly original from my own design. To tackle this, I first drew out a scale model to make my templates from, and helped me decide what kind of wood I wanted to use. I was lucky enough to win a bid online for this Burl that was almost big enough for a guitar top. I honestly have no idea what species it is, but it smells like the most aromatic cedar to have ever graced my nostrils. If I was smart enough, I'd definitely figure out a way to turn this into an air freshener. It smelled like fall and Christmas in my shop for the entirety of the build process. It's also extremely soft and fragile. A piece of memory foam could have probably put a dent in it, so the milling process was extended due to having to take the smallest possible passes at the jointer and planer. I've never worked with burl of any species before, so I was super excited to see what a book match of something this figured would look like. It may not seem too daunting, but figuring out how to get this split down the middle was absolute hell. I had no straight edges to reference, and I just had to trust my moderately firm math skills and pray. Luckily, because it was so soft, I didn't have any serious blade drift to worry about. When I build guitars, I like to add something I've never done before to each one. A new skill or technique to challenge myself and grow as a woodworker. For the most part, I only add one new thing to try each time, but this go around I went with like 5. The first being epoxy. It's not my first time using epoxy, but it is for guitar. I'm not a huge fan of working with it, mostly because it's expensive, messy, and slow, and I'm really impatient. If there's anything YouTube taught me about wood and epoxy, it's to make sure the live edges are cleaned up to allow for a strong bond that won't fail in the near future. One of the reasons I hate epoxy is how much work and wasted money can come from a simple mistake. I've had epoxy stick to melamine forms like this because I didn't prep it properly. Seeing as I hate buying new things like mold release, I decided to give paste wax a try as a mold release because I had it laying around in the shop already. I'm a firm believer that the only colors of epoxy that look good with wood is either black or clear. I've never understood the taste for rainbow swirly colors being poured onto multi-$1,000 slabs. I guess it's all subjective, but it just does something to me that makes me feel like I should go play in traffic. Anybody else feel that way? What are your thoughts on epoxy furniture? Should we start a coalition against metallic rainbow swirls and pricey walnut? If you've seen my last guitar build, I did a giveaway for a guitar neck and just wanted to give a shout out to the winner Cody from Calgary, Canada. I've decided to start doing more giveaways as a way to say thanks to those that continue to support the channel. This time I'm doing an entire guitar template package giveaway. It will be made of 1/2 inch MDF and will include a double cut body template, a neck template, humbucker templates, electronics cavity and lid templates, and even a chambered body template if you want to make it a hollow body. For those of you who have wanted to try a guitar build, this will make everything as easy as possible. All you have to do is route your wood with flush trim bits to the templates and you'll have perfectly shaped guitar and neck without any of the math. Last time I gave the prize to the 100th commenter. This time, I'll be doing a drawing after getting 250 comments and 250 likes. I feel like that's a little bit more fair. All you have to do is subscribe and leave a comment and you're entered to win. You can comment as many times as you'd like and I'll add an entry each time. Best part is, I'll cover shipping and include instructions on where to drill the holes, what sizes and types of hardware to use, and even open myself up to questions via email or phone call to walk you through the process. One cool part about this build is something I didn't have the balls to film. I'm lucky enough to live near a well-known woodworking YouTuber's shop and he was kind enough to let me use his drum sander to get this top flat and smooth. I won't drop his name, but his channel rhymes with The Wood Whisperer. Another new to me feature on this guitar was a chambered semi-hollow body portion that had a unique sound hole placement. This required some pre-planning to make sure I could get everything lined up properly before the lamination glue up. Before we get to that, check out this grain reveal with mineral spirits. This shit looks nice. You'll notice a little wood ear on the left and the cutaway not actually being cut away. That's part of the pre-planning, and I'll explain it shortly. I found this guitar deserved a bit of contrast in color, so I found this African mahogany for a steal of a price. The only bad part about African mahogany is that it's heavier than the balls of Neil Armstrong when he lied about walking on the moon. That would actually be a cool guitar idea. Somehow incorporate moon rock, rocket fuel, and conspiracy into a guitar body. Anyone watching this have the problem where you get nice tools and within a year or two feel like they're not good enough? Or your life would be better if you just had a couple more inches? On your joiner, of course. I've had an 8-inch joiner for a while, and I don't know if it's a spoiled mindset or if I really need a 16-inch joiner so I don't have to rip a bunch of stuff at the bandsaw only so it can fit the 8-incher. Someone tell me I'm not crazy so my wife can see it and approve of the purchase. Wouldn't it also be nice to be able to flatten entire guitar bodies with just a couple passes on a sexy 16-inch cast iron bed with a helix cutting system? One day. I got the idea to add a little bit of color and separation from the top and back portions. My local hardwood dealer had this standard birch veneer that I thought would look cool sandwiched in the middle. My idea was that it would provide an ultra-thin binding look in the middle and also look cool as some sort of racing stripes on the back. Of course, this meant more steps in glue up and more steps post glue up. But sometimes we must give way to design at the cost of our patience. I've never used veneer this way before, but I've seen it done in a similar fashion. I just had the sneakiest suspicion that it's not structurally reliable because it's so damn thin. But from what I understand, the science claims the glue is where the strength comes from. Trusting the science isn't always my strong suit, but I gave it a chance and I was pleasantly surprised. One of those extra steps I mentioned was flattening by hand. That 16-inch jointer would come in handy right about now. Using a pencil to track my progress in a super old Stanley plane, I tackled this the old-fashioned way and made sure it was flat with a straight edge before moving on. Not gonna lie, I was a little sore after doing this for a while. Another extra step was doing this glue up in multiple steps. I needed to get the birch veneer laminated to the backside so I could figure out where to chamber it before gluing on the top. My vacuum press has been acting up recently, so I used some melamine with cardboard taped to it to apply even pressure in the clamps, acting as a DIY veneer press. To keep things tidy, I needed to mark the location of the top and pre-drill it in place. This way, I'll have no issues with alignment after hollowing out the body. This next part isn't necessary yet, but I wanted to remove most of the bulk so I wasn't dealing with such a heavy chunk of wood. You can see where I traced out the guitar and drew my hollow chambered portions to use as guides. This is a good time to mention you don't need a bandsaw for guitar builds unless you plan on doing your own book matches. This would have been way easier with a jigsaw, but I hate jigsaws and I hate changing out bandsaw blades. To save my router bits from some struggle, I drilled out most of the chambered areas before routing it. It saves the life of router bits and makes everything easier to work with. I also like to save these shavings to pack Christmas presents in when I make small gifts for family and friends. I made a template for a router to follow to make everything look clean. This is actually the template I'll be using to make the 1/2-inch MDF chambered portion of the template package as part of the giveaway. Once I had everything drilled out, I just used a pattern bit to clean up on the sides and the bottom. It's a little messy, but it looks way better and was needed since you'll be able to see a portion of it through the top. Accounting for a large chamfer on the top, I cut out this little hole in the top left corner. My goal was to have it act as a window to reveal a law enforcement challenge coin hidden in the body. There was no template here, I just followed the curvature of the body to have it tie in all together. The top was still a bit thick as well, so I used a chisel to chamfer the backside. This allowed the hole to have a more delicate look from the top. I actually work in law enforcement, and this challenge coin was given to me by a citizen randomly one day. I decided it would be cool to permanently memorialize it in the guitar. I glued it in the top corner with a quick curing 2-part epoxy, then filled the chamber with a shallow pour of clear epoxy. It's just a small detail I thought would be cool, seeing as it's being donated to that auction I previously mentioned. It also seemed to match the Burl and black epoxy top, inspiring me to use gold and black hardware later on. When it came time to finally glue on the top, I had to use 2 different adhesives as I was unsure if PVA glue would bond well to epoxy. I used standard Type-On 3 for the Burl portions and epoxy over the black portions. This meant a longer time in clamps, but it would ensure I'd have a good bond in all locations. This is where those pre-drilled screws came in handy. They kept my top in line with the center line and chambered portions and kept everything from slipping when I threw it all in clamps with nails. The template on top allowed the clamps to provide even pressure across the surface and also prevented the clamps from damaging the soft burl face. After about 24 hours, I was able to get this thing back to the bandsaw and get as close to the template line as possible to avoid chip out at the router table later on. I also needed to remove the ear and cutaway portion, as they were done serving their purpose. I always find template routing as one of the most satisfying parts of a build. It's really cool to see the rough shape come to a smooth guitar shape and reveal all the layers making up the guitar. There's a guitar builder I follow, and his brand is Barlow Guitars. He always takes his guitars to the next level with gorgeously figured woods and design. I've been rather attracted to the heavy chamfers I've seen on his builds and wanted to incorporate that into this guitar. It's simple, clean, and after going deep enough with the chamfer bit, it allows all layers of the guitar to be visible from the front. Using my largest chamfer bit, I took multiple small steps up until I reached a desired look. I'll also be including an MDF portion of this template in the giveaway. It includes the neck pocket and 2 humbucker wells. I made this back when I had a CNC and went through quite a bit of material before I landed the perfect fit for the neck template I made also. It's set to be too tight at first, but after some light sanding on the neck heel, it's a really tight and satisfying fit. I like to follow Fender standards when I do bolt-on necks. That means the neck pocket is routed to 5/8 of an inch deep. I don't know what that is in millimeters, but that's why Google exists. In fact, everything I've learned about making guitars has come from Google and YouTube, which is insane. Every single thing I've ever learned about woodworking has been online. Just hours of obsessively watching videos and researching. Which led me to the whole tone wood thing. I don't think I've made a guitar build video yet without mentioning the tone wood myth. At least when it comes to electric guitars, acoustics are different. Make an electric guitar with whatever your heart desires. A quick story about that. I recently purchased this 1,000-pound Chinkapin oak burl and have it drying in a DIY kiln in my basement. Oak is allegedly notorious for being a bad tone wood for guitars. but you bet your ass I'm still going to be using it for one. Once it's completed drying, I'll definitely have a build video out for it too. Here's a sneak peek of it in my truck. My buddy Sean and I actually had to cut it to pieces with the chainsaw so I can get it on the local sawmill easier. Back to our regularly scheduled programming. I made this template for the electronics pocket and also made a corresponding lid template for it. They'll be included in the giveaway as well. I like the pockets to be as big as it allows for tidier wiring setups, and it removes more weight from the body. To fit the lid, I used a 1/8 inch rabbiting bit to create a lip around the edge. Instead of screws or magnets, I'm going with a friction fit lid. Less materials, less work, and more satisfying. I had some curly maple laying around that was nearly the perfect size for the lid and would offer a good contrast to the back. I resawed it to about 1/4 inch or so, which kept it sturdy enough for a lid without being some big bulky block. I ended up not liking the color contrast and found this leftover Rubio charcoal colored finish. This allowed the curly grain to still be visible, but tied the color in the guitar's color theme much nicer. Check out this fit. It made me think of that things that Italians apparently do with their fingers and thumbs. You know what I'm talking about. In woodworking, there's all kinds of tricks you learn along the way that you would have never thought of yourself. I was watching another builder use magnets as a guide and my mind was blown. I used these to trace out the edge of the electronics pocket so I could accurately choose where to place my knobs and switch. Before drilling the holes, I made this template to recess the knob position slightly with a cove bit. It's merely a design choice, but it's also one of those things I haven't done yet. Even though I had a chamfered edge, I still wanted some carved top influences, and I felt this added some depth to the design. Before removing the template, I took the corresponding size Forstner bit and tapped a pilot point for each hole. This allowed me to stay center when I later drilled for the knobs and switches.
I like that.
If you watched my last build, you know that input jack holes are the bane of my existence. I tried to give drilling it out just one more chance before realizing I was better off taking the time to make a jig for it. For the life of me, I can't keep the bit straight or avoid chip out. My solution was to make a temporary right angle platform to rest a router on. I drilled the correct size hole through the platform and used a pattern bit in my router to hollow out the area. This was much cleaner, straighter, and overall less anxiety-inducing. Here's a quick overview shot after a brief sanding, and you can see how cool the recessed electronics are going to look, at least in my opinion. I'm expecting some serious face melting shredding to happen on this guitar one day, so it definitely needed a rear cutaway relief. As always, I tackled this with a series of rasps and sandpaper. These goldish colored rasps are still my favorite, and they're also pretty cheap. I use them in every build and they're still not getting dull. I'll leave a link in the description for you to check out. It's a typical Amazon link that gives me a kickback for sending you there but doesn't charge you anything extra. Best part is you'll be getting some great rasps for super cheap. Say that 10 times fast. If you remember, this Burl top is super soft and brittle. So instead of doing a typical oil finish, I went ahead and grain filled it with epoxy first. I'm not using epoxy as the finish, just a couple coats to soak into the top so it stiffens it up and fills the grain. I didn't document the whole finishing process, but essentially I used a few different oils and later buffed it up with 2000 grit and 4000 grit foam sanding pads. The epoxy also locks in the color and depth, and as you can see, it is gorgeous. With every build, I always run into something that turns into the absolute biggest headache. This time, it was the neck. I've had this catalpa wood in my shop for a while and was super excited to see it come to life. It's really soft, but extremely stable and durable. It also seemed to pair nicely color-wise with the leftover curly maple from earlier. What was even better was I didn't have to buy it. I already had it dried out in the shop. I like to trace the neck design and mark out the center line all the way down the neck blank as a reference point for the truss rod. It makes lining up the fretboard later on stress-free. An easy way to get the proper depth for the truss rod is with a plunge base. I just tighten the depth gauge all the way down on the rod, then back it off a quarter turn after bottoming out the bit to the workpiece. This takes all of the measuring and guesswork out of the equation. These parts are crucial to keep in line, and my method of maintaining that is just a few brad nails on the outside of the template line. And nothing works better for pressure than an obscene amount of cabinet clamps. And yet again, another new to me situation. I've always done straight headstocks with string trees and wanted to try out an angled headstock approach. I did a standard 11-degree angle so the tuners could pull the strings down over the nut with enough pressure. I also cut the neck to be 1 inch thick overall. That includes the fretboard. With the 5/8 inch neck pocket, it allows the fretboard to stick out 3/8 of an inch over the body. Perfect for a standard hardtail bridge. How do you like that quick math? I'm also going to include an MDF version of this neck template as well. As mentioned earlier, it's designed to fit the neck pocket template perfectly just by flush trimming and sanding a little bit. I bought this spindle sander used for $100 a while back and it's becoming one of my favorite tools. I like to make fences for it so I can remove bandsaw marks from necks evenly. It's dusty, but it's absolutely worth it. Otherwise, I'd be stuck slowly hand sanding and checking for even removal the whole time. Since the headstock is angled, I had to prop up the heel to begin routing out a majority of the neck material. I use this bit every single time and it's never failed me. I'll leave a link in the description for this one as well, because I've used this router bit on every guitar I've made. Shaping the neck transitions with hand tools will never not make me feel like I'm a better woodworker than I actually am. I enjoy this part because it allows me to be creative with my hands. The transitions come out more organic and natural, which to me makes for a better playing experience in the end. This is where I messed everything up. I wanted to add binding to hide the fret tangs and add some color to the sides of the neck. I normally do this before I shape the neck because a shaped neck doesn't have a flat, straight edge for a router bit to follow. Once I realized how bad it was too late. But you better be damn sure I got my truss rod back. Once I was done crying inside, I went out and bought some mahogany and wenge to make a new neck. And honestly, it's like it was meant to be because the color combination was much more fitting to the guitar body. What do you think? Do you prefer the maple and catalpa or the wenge and mahogany? This next part just looks like your average garage woodworker, like me, getting ready to add some binding. But what it really is an idiot putting too much glue in the binding channels, which later led him to have to reslot the frets and cut through the binding, leaving the fret tangs visible again, undermining all of the work of remaking a new neck in the first place. To force me to cut square and true lines, I glued some magnets to a 1-2-3 block and put sandpaper on the bottom. This helps in starting odd cuts on small places like this. For the other end of the binding, I just used an upside down chisel to pair in with the flushed curved surface. I left a clamp on the binding just behind the chisel to help hold it in place and prevent the chisel force from separating the glue bond. For fret inlays, I had a different idea that felt easy to achieve. I wanted to do a reverse Eclipse design. I had some leftover 1/4-inch poplar dowel stock, which would be a great contrast from the dark fretboard. The lighter poplar would act as a large moon in the night sky. After getting them glued in and flushed up to the fretboard, I added 1/8-inch brass rod to act as a small sun reverse eclipsing the poplar moon. It's different and I really like how it turned out. My favorite part was that it was super easy to achieve something like this. And one thing I didn't film, but assured is done, is I added a 12-inch radius to the neck with a radius sanding block. On to another new thing I wanted to try. Instead of using screws to bolt on the neck, I wanted to use threaded inserts and hex bolts. I searched all over and couldn't find a standard size for the insert or the bolts for this, so I'll share what I decided to go with, which worked out perfectly. The inserts are from Easy Lock and they're 832 thread. These particular inserts required a 17/64 drill bit to install, which was surprisingly available at my local big box store. I won't focus too much on fretwork this time, especially because I'm still mad about the binding and fret tang issue, but I used gold frets and took out my frustrations on them with a hammer instead of the fret press. I felt like I was reaching the end with just some final holes to drill and finish to add. I just went with a standard hard wax oil for the neck, and I really liked the overall look and feel of it. Here's that neck fit that I promised. I installed the final pieces of hardware but had some serious issues with the wiring, so I didn't get to do a sound test for this video, and I'm sorry. I'm likely going to take it to someone who understands electronics way better than me to figure out the issue. But overall, I think this guitar came out super cool. The curves and the color theme really make it stand out in my opinion. If you like this video and want to see more guitar builds and woodworking content, make sure to like and subscribe. I'll put some other guitar builds here to check out. Thanks for watching and happy building.